Hey everyone. Tonight, I'm going to tell you a true crime story. Gently. So before you get cozy, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. And if you don't mind, drop your city and your local time in the comments. I love seeing where and when you're tuning in from. Now, turn off the lights, switch on a fan for a soft hum, and let's start tonight's journey together. You step out with me into a small town night that smells like wet cedar and diesel, the kind of place where the stoplights blink yellow after 10 and porch bulbs do more work than the street lamps. You can hear the creek chewing at its banks behind the hardware store, and the supermarket sign clicks at a lazy frequency, as if the whole town is a clock that forgot what hour it's supposed to keep. You're not a detective, you're just you, walking the sidewalks you've always known. Only tonight, every familiar angle feels like it's keeping a secret. They say the arrest came at dawn last week, but it's the evening air that carries its shock, strips the varnish from habit. No one ever expects the person they wave to at the post office to be escorted out in cuffs. You remember the year that started this, 1998, when the town was smaller and so were you. Back then, the payphone outside the diner ate quarters for breakfast, and CDs lived in sun-cracked cases on car floor mats. The night of the disappearance had a blue taste, a sharp edge like winter in your throat, even though it was early fall. She was 21, a barista at the corner cafe, with the windows that steamed like a living thing. You knew her as a nod, a smile, and the warm thump of her saying hi through a cardigan sleeve and a paper cup. The rumor then was that she walked home after close, cut through the alley behind the laundromat, and then nothing. A van? A shadow? A story you build when you have no story. The town learned how to speak softly around her name. Here's the first hard plank beneath your feet. In 1998, the FBI's Combined DNA Index System CODIS was declared fully operational nationwide. That's a real mile marker in the road of forensic history. It means that, suddenly, the lonely little ladders of ATGC from scenes across the country could climb into a single repository. Our case had swabs and tape lifts, all logged and bagged by the county lab, set aside like jars of summer jam on a cold pantry shelf, waiting for a winter that would need them. But it wasn't just science holding its breath. It was the town. After the first year, missing flyers faded from staples into sun-bleached paper ghosts, and the cafe scrubbed her tip jar sticker off the glass, and the alley learned to look like any other passage between buildings. People who aren't part of a story still prefer an ending, so they wrote their own. She ran off, she owed money, and she was seen at a music festival near the coast. These theories were guilt wearing different hats. You carry them even now, like coins you never spend. Let's stand by the creek a moment. The water carries glints of the grocery store's red sign, and a raccoon lifts its little hands as if praying to the current. And in that hush, you can hear a weird detail that never made sense. 2 weeks after she vanished, a library book checked out in her name. An anthology of Pacific Northwest ghost stories was returned through the drop slot before sunrise. No one saw who did it. The librarian at the time swore the date stamp was hers, but the signature on the card was not. It's small, almost silly, except the town never forgot. Who finished a book for a missing girl? You swing by the cafe, now repainted a neutral gray, as if color is a liability. Inside, a chalkboard menu lists drinks with names that sound like passwords to a club you don't want to enter. You stand in line and watch steam coil from a new machine that didn't exist back then. The barista smiles in the universal language of service and asks your name, and you give it. And you're flooded with the feeling of doing something both ordinary and monumental. Because now you all know, that the man arrested last week is someone you've seen in places like this. He's a contractor with a pale ring where his wedding band used to sit. He sponsors a Little League team. He once donated hot dog buns for the 4th of July picnic. The arrest broke the town's voice into syllables. How? Why? Him. A memory surfaces. A sound. The squeal of a dolly's wheels over cracked concrete. The clunk of a storage unit's corrugated door. It's not yours alone. A lot of people have it. He ran a small storage facility back then, inherited from a cousin. You used to drive by it at dusk and think the place looked like a row of mouths with metal lips. No one ever wants to consider how ordinary spaces can swallow nights and keep chewing. The sheriff's office is 2 blocks over, square and practical, with a flag that clicks when the rope hits the pole. You stop at the steps, but don't go in. You'd only find fluorescent lights and the hush of a printer warming up and a bulletin board whose pushpins hold up the town's unsolveds like polite disappointments. An open question rustles inside you, one the academics argue about in journals that don't know your main street. Are so-called flashbulb memories clear? Cinematic recollections of shocking events really more accurate? Or do they just feel that way because the emotion is louder? You replay where you were when you heard the news, a text from your cousin, a chorus of gasps at the supermarket, and the way Mrs. Valdez touched her necklace. You can describe the smell of cat food in the pet aisle. Accuracy? Or the brain's talent for retcon? You walk past the high school field, where the bleachers hold last season's gum and this season's hopes. The town's band building still hums when the HVAC kicks on, and a light in the music office burns late, as if perseverance were a filament. You remember the pep rally the week after she vanished, an attempt to glue morale back together with brass and drum. The principal mispronounced her name, and half the gym flinched. The other half clapped because silence felt worse. A breeze pushes through the chain-link fences and rings the little tabs of aluminum someone twisted there like wind chimes. The sound is thin, eerie in its cheerfulness. A dog barks twice and quits, like a witness who changes their mind mid-sentence. It's funny what you remember. The vending machine outside the community center that used to stutter and return your quarters as if refusing to take your money after dark. Strange how these things become coordinates on your internal map of the case. Weeks ago, before the arrest, the case shifted. You didn't know it yet, but it did. A second cousin who lives 3 towns over sent in one of those home DNA kits to track his Scandinavian roots, and like a match struck in a cave, a small circle lit up. The genealogists, detectives of ancestry with patience like riverstones, began tracing branches backward, finding surnames folded under surnames, baptisms forgotten in church basements, and marriage licenses that smelled like decaying glue. A narrowed suspect list took shape. It wasn't a miracle. It was math plus family. The science is cool metal against your palm. Modern forensic genealogy lets analysts use public-facing genetic databases, building family trees toward a suspect, then asking, quietly, for a warrant to compare a known sample with old evidence. People will debate the ethics forever. Privacy versus public safety. Consent versus consequence. You hold that debate in your chest too, the way you hold a stone you can't throw, but don't want to drop. For tonight, the only thing you feel certain of is this. The jar on the cold pantry shelf finally came down. You pass the library, the locus of that old weirdness, and press your fingers to the book drop as if it's a temple. Inside, the air smells like paper and lemon cleaner. Under glass is a display about local history. Sawmill photos, 4-H ribbons, and a baseball signed by the 1979 team that went to state. And tucked in the corner, a photocopy of the Ghost Story Anthology's checkout card, the one with her name and that wrong signature. The librarian sees you looking and says nothing, which is the most respectful thing a person can do with a fragile object. When the arrest warrant was executed, they say he didn't fight. He blinked, lifted his hands, and asked if he could call his sister. You hear details that cross over into gossip, the size of the coffee mug in his sink, the brand of cereal on the counter, the faded teddy bear in a box in the garage. You swat them away like gnats. You're more interested in the part about the swab, how they got it from a disposable cup he tossed after a city council meeting. You imagine the cup resting on the rim of a metal trash can, the lip print a perfect half moon, science bending close like a curious friend. You think of CODIS again, that 1,998-mile marker, and how a little piece of this town's sorrow rode the circuitry for years, waiting for a match. At the corner, you stop where the cafe's alley begins. The new owners brightened it with potted ferns and a string of Edison bulbs. But shadows still conspire in the midline. You feel the old chill a draft from the past's cracked window. You don't step in. Not yet. You narrate it to yourself instead. You walk. You listen. You smell metal and detergent. And somewhere, a dryer door keeps bumping like a heartbeat. You imagine a route she might have taken. A timing that lines up with an engine's rumble. And an opportunity practiced in the quiet. You do not let your mind write the middle of the story in blood, because PG-13 is not just a rating, it's a way to hold dignity. Another fact that belongs on the table, because stories need anchors. The Miranda warning, the one you've heard on television 1,000 times, came from a 1966 Supreme Court decision, Miranda versus Pass, Arizona, establishing that suspects must be informed of their rights. You picture the words offered in a calm voice in a small room with a flickering fluorescent tube, the syllables plain as water. You wonder if he listened. Around town, reactions move like weather. The bakery gives away coffee for anyone who needs a minute. Church bells ring, once at noon, no announcement, no reason. Kids on scooters do slow loops around the gazebo, their parents watching with that distant stare of people who need to be outdoors but don't know why. You hear competing theories bloom again, like stubborn wildflowers. Maybe he's a fall guy. Maybe the lab contaminated something. Maybe the town just wanted a face to stamp on its fear. And there's another scholarly argument humming under all that about confirmation bias, about how once you think you know, your brain edits the past to fit the conclusion. You're cautious with your certainty. You hold it, but loosely. You head home as the first real night breezes rise from the creek. Your porch light throws a soft triangle onto the steps. The fan in your bedroom will hum. The comments will fill with cities and times, with thanks and with theories, with people who remember their own. 1,998 seconds in towns with other names. You will sit with the weight of a community remembering how to exhale. And you'll notice one more oddity, a final detail, like a penny found in the grass. The cafe's new chalkboard, wiped clean this morning, now bears a faint, ghostly outline under the specials, her favorite drink from the old days, barely visible, as if the board itself hasn't forgotten. You angle your phone to the window and catch your reflection superimposed on the town's face. You look like everyone else here, hoping that a door has finally opened not into grief but into the next room where answers sit at a table, patient, unafraid of the light. You tell yourself that after all these years, maybe the story will choose an ending that does not burn. You breathe in, and the night smells like cedar again, like diesel, like waiting. And you whisper to the dark, "We're still listening." A cop car idles by the curb, and you catch the reflection of its light bar wavering against the aluminum doors. The engine's purr feels like the world clearing its throat. The news says they've served additional search warrants, and that the arrest was only the first hinge to swing. You picture a line of evidence, bags blooming like paper lanterns in a chain receipt, books, hinge screws, and a stack of lease applications under a paperweight, sent as a gag gift that now looks obscene. You wonder if there's a form somewhere with your name on it, or hers, or his sister's. Each line a hair of connection you can't stop feeling. The town's rumor mill has seasons, and you're in a storm now. Someone says a bracelet was found. Someone else says a set of keys. Someone swears they once saw him buy a shovel after midnight, as if hardware stores keep witching hour registers. You know how stories sprout. A grain of truth, a cup of fear, and a pinch of hindsight. You respect what the sheriff said at the mic voice slow, posture square that the investigation is ongoing and that speculation can harm. His badge caught the sunlight like a small, stubborn star. You tuck that image in your pocket for when your brain tries to run ahead. You walk to the cafe again, because the human heart is a homing device for unresolved places. A couple of old-timers play chess on the patio, their pieces nicked and dingy from years of concession stand fingers. You order a decaf this time, and the cup warms your palm as if a friendly animal has decided to sit with you. A flyer on the bulletin board asks for volunteers to help digitize school yearbooks. The past is always looking for a better archive. That's how you find yourself staring at a photo from the late 90s striped polo shirts, maladjusted bangs, the whole world lit by camera flash. There she is, 2 rows up, half smiling like she's heard a joke the lens will miss. The caption has her name spelled right. You feel a silly relief blooming in your chest at something so small being correct. One of the baristas, different from earlier mentions, almost absently, that a third cousin of the arrested man came in last winter and left a tip in $2 bills. Crisp, as if they'd been sleeping in a drawer for years. The detail has no weight until it does. Your mind wants to knit every odd stitch into a sweater that fits the shape of guilt. But you set it aside, like you set aside a plate you're not sure is clean. You take your cup to the alley and stand at the threshold. A moth circles the Edison bulb in a hopeful spiral, a small, irrational moon landing. Somewhere behind the laundromat wall, a washer thunks like a nervous heartbeat. The brick breathes out the faint mineral cold that never quite leaves, no matter the season. You catch yourself counting steps 1, 2, 3, in the rhythm of a walk practiced by a girl who may have just wanted to beat the red light at the corner. You hear distant laughter from the patio. Life continues, not as a rebuke, but as physics. People still ask you if you think they got the right guy. You answer honestly. You think you don't know. You think you are not a lab. You think you will listen when the evidence enters a room and says hello. In your head, you replay a classroom lesson about critical thinking. Beware of the clean narrative. Beware of the villain who arrives too perfectly cast. Somewhere, an academic would remind you that narrative coherence is not the same as proof, that humans crave symmetry, and that our brains hurt less when stories close, like well-made drawers. You nod along, watching the alley's little vortex of light, feeling a draft across your ankles. You remember a story your aunt used to tell about locks and keys, about how in the 1800s, some small towns in the American West reportedly posted key trees, places where travelers hung spare keys for communal use. Trust nailed into bark. You don't know if your aunt got the details right, but the image sticks. An entire community believing in shared access. The opposite image belongs to now. Passcodes, permissions, and token gates. It occurs to you that both metaphors apply opening and sealing, sharing and withholding when you think about the past 2 decades of forensic science. Here is one anchor you can place with care. In 2013, the U.S. Supreme Court decided Maryland versus Lestface King, holding that police may collect DNA via cheek swab from arrestees for serious offenses, treating it like fingerprints for identification. You don't legal brief it in your head. You just remember the way that ruling slid into the nation's toolkit like a new blade. It explains one more way, among several, that names and profiles flow into the systems that can wake up old cases. You also know that some people found that ruling reassuring, and others found it chilling, and both feelings felt like fidelity to something important. You let that complexity sit beside you on the curb. You head toward the library for the night lecture they scheduled months ago, long before any of this, about local waterways and salmon runs. The timing feels strange, but right fish don't cancel for grief. In the meeting room, the projector hums, and a kind biologist points at maps with neon rivers. Her voice is the good kind of teacher voice, unhurried, clear, and affectionately nerdy. She talks about anadromous life cycles and culverts, about how a single blocked passage can starve a whole watershed. The metaphor nearly knocks you over. When the Q&A opens, a retired shop teacher asks if the town's redevelopment plan will fix the culvert by the old mill road, and the biologist says it's on the list, funding pending. Everyone nods the nod of people who know what pending feels like. Afterward, you linger by the display case again and look at the checkout card one more time. An employee nearby mentions a tidbit you hadn't heard. The ghost story anthology always came back with a pressed fern in the last chapter for years, as if someone wanted to leave a green bookmark nobody could miss. A weird, almost tender ritual that now feels hushed and unsettling. You file it away with the $2 bills. Across the street, the night clerk at the gas station tapes an out-of-order note on pump 3, which has been out of order since before the new year. The sign is more of a reassurance than a message, a way of saying, yes, we see it. You buy a pack of mints and a bottle of windshield washer fluid you don't need? Because while you're here, it seems polite to participate in commerce. The clerk offers you a scratch-off ticket someone forgot, and you decline, and he shrugs, and for a moment you taste the baseline steadiness of a world that is not your case. You walk by the sheriff's office again and see a light on in what must be the records room. Manila folders stand at attention on a rolling cart like thin soldiers awaiting orders. You think about how many hands each of those has passed through, the human chain between a moment something happens and a moment someone understands it. Process is not romance, you tell yourself. Process is the opposite of rumor. It's deliberately boring so the truth doesn't slip. On your phone, an article slides by about probabilistic genotyping software, algorithms with names like STR mix and true allele that estimate the weight of complex DNA mixtures. Experts disagree. Cross-examination gets spicy. Journal letters fly like paper airplanes. You don't need the math to recognize the conversation. How much faith can we place in black box tools when liberty is at stake? You keep that line in your head too. Not to make you anxious, but to keep you honest. Precision matters. Chain of custody matters. Interpretation matters. You hold all three, like juggling balls you're not practiced at, hoping none hit the ground. Your route bends toward the high school, where a booster club hangs a banner that reads, Homecoming Friday. The letters flap like slow applause. Under the stadium lights, a youth soccer team does wind sprints, and the coach claps a rhythm that says, I remember what this age needs. Structure and encouragement in equal parts. A parent at the fence checks her phone and inhales when a news alert pops. The sound small, but unmistakable. You don't ask what it says. Later, you'll know anyway. Back home, you sit on the stoop and pick at a splinter that has been flirting with your thumb for weeks. Crickets, ratchet, steady and content. Somewhere, a train gives a half-hearted horn. The kind that sounds like it's just saying, heads up. You let your mind make a map. Her last known steps, his known employment, the library book, the storage units, the cup at the council meeting, and the arrest at dawn. Not a straight line. A constellation, inviting you to see a familiar shape. You squint at the dots. The human brain is a prodigy at constellations. You remind yourself it's also great at inventing the bear, where there are only bright pinpricks. A text arrives from your cousin, the one who told you first, saying the arraignment's set for Thursday. Then another message. Do you remember that old payphone outside the diner? You do. He says they're tearing it out finally. A contractor found a wad of ticket stubs tucked inside the coin return. All from the same movie theater. All the same title, from the fall of '98. The movie is surprisingly sweet, about found family and second chances. The coincidence feels like a trick the universe plays to keep everyone superstitious. Still, the detail grips you, not because it proves anything, but because objects hoard time. You imagine the stubs warm from someone's pocket, pushed into the cold mouth of a machine that never called back. You climb the stairs, the fan in your room already working the air into a soothing loop. You sit at the edge of the bed and think about all the years when nothing happened publicly. It can be hard to respect the part of a story where the camera just stares at the night and listens. But that's where you lived. Fundraisers that made just enough, cadaver dogs that didn't alert, volunteers who searched and then hugged one another and promised to search again when the weather made sense. You remember a bake sale where a little boy frosted cupcakes with extravagant swirls, as if sugar itself could bribe fate into cooperation. You bought two and pretended they were excellent. They were fine. The point wasn't flavor. It was proof that you were still here. The town council meets again tomorrow. On the agenda, potholes, playground replacement parts, a permit for a new awning downtown, and, tacked at the bottom like a quiet footnote, a community comment period. Your mind conjures a microphone and a line of citizens measuring their words. Someone will ask about court security. Someone will ask about media trucks blocking the loading zone by the bakery. Someone will press for a moment of silence. You imagine the council president's gavel landing, patient, trying to keep the meeting in its lane. Democracy looks so humble in fluorescent lighting. That humility comforts you. You think about the weird detail of the fern again, a leaf pressed between pages as if patience could be archived, and then you recall the old librarian who kept a candy dish of butterscotch on her desk, always fresh, always replenished, and how on the day of the candlelight vigil, she switched to peppermint because she said grief needs something sharper. These odd little choices are the town's fingerprints. They don't solve anything. They tell you who you are. You stand in your kitchen with the soft rattle of the window screen, tapping like a metronome against the frame, and you realize you're rehearsing the town's last week the way you rehearse an old song, verse, chorus, bridge, breath. You top off a glass of water, and it tastes faintly metallic, the way taps do after rain. Your phone buzzes with a group text that didn't exist in 1998. Neighbors, cousins, and that one classmate who moved away and still somehow knows things. The thread scrolls and scrolls. Court dates, grainy photos, a screenshot of the booking record, and a map with pins that claim to prove a point. You scroll gently, like you're petting a skittish animal. Outside, the night stacks up in sober layers. You put on a jacket, step onto the porch, and feel the boards answer your weight with a tiny groan. Across the street, Mr. Ortega waters his tomatoes as if routine itself were a prayer. He nods. You nod back. Neither of you mention the name that is blooming on everyone's lips like a bruise. You head down the steps, past your mailbox with its dings and stickers, and you walk. Because walking is the oldest way to think. You loop toward the storage units, those metal mouths you remember, now branded with a fresher logo and a slogan about space for what matters. The office smells like dry dust and citrus cleaner. The fridge hums the single note of fluorescent convenience. On the corkboard, business cards pinned in rows, a flyer for a lost cat, a handwritten notice that says, "Pay online, no cash accepted." The new manager recognizes you the way small towns do, with a tight smile and a tiny lift of the chin that says, "I know your face, and your face knows mine." You ask nothing. You buy a padlock you don't need. You turn it in your hand and feel its weight. Standing at your window, you catch your reflection once more. A person poised at the hinge point between not knowing and maybe, finally, knowing more. You concede that even the hinge is a place to rest. Your shoulder drops. Your jaw unclenches. You decide that until the evidence speaks in full sentences, you will practice a kind of vigil that looks like ordinary life. Wash the dishes. Wave to Mr. Ortega. Water the plant you always forget. And pay for a stranger's coffee if the moment strikes. You choose to let the case breathe, to let the people doing the work, and to hold the family hers, all of them, the whole constellation of grief, with a tenderness you don't need to announce. You place your phone face down. You make the fan your metronome. You settle under the covers and tell the night that you will not confuse volume with truth. The creek will chew at its banks. The supermarket sign will click its lazy clicks. Somewhere, an evidence bag will be sealed, initialed, and set in a bin that is not a pantry anymore, but a doorway. You whisper the same promise you whispered at the alley's edge. We're still listening. And the town, that ragged chorus, answers without words. You close your eyes and see the storage units. the library slot, the alley light, and the curve of a disposable cup on a trash can rim. You see her half smile in the yearbook and the $2 bills and the fern and a banner that says homecoming. You see a judge's bench and a biologist's map and a culvert waiting on funding. You see careful hands opening a box, not to cause pain, but to take its measure. You breathe, slow and even, and let the most radical idea of all settle into the room, like the gentlest kind of weather. That truth, however complicated, can live among us without burning the house down. That your town can be a place where answers are welcomed with dignity, where surprise does not demand cruelty, and where people can look at one another in daylight and still recognize the common work of being human. You whisper goodnight to the creek and to the neon and to the moth and to the chess players and to the librarian and to the kid with the cupcakes and to the shop teacher and to the clerk and to the sheriff and to the biologist and to the parent at the fence and to the cousin who texts too many screenshots and to the man in the booking photo who is still, whether or not you like it, part of this town's story. You let the list get long because love is an inventory. You let it end because sleep is the archive that makes tomorrow possible. And before you drift, you picture a door, not the metal jaws of storage, not the library slot, not the alley mouth, just a plain door with sunlight touching the seam. Someone is on the other side. You decide to wait, quietly, for the knock. The morning after the arraignment feels oddly polite. You wake to pale light, pushing through the blinds, soft and indecisive, as if the day itself doesn't want to intrude. You pour coffee into the same chipped mug you've had since college, the one with the faded slogan from a summer fair, and watch the steam rise like a thought you almost remember. The fan hums behind you, your only companion in this quiet investigation of air and time. Outside, the town doesn't look changed, but you can sense the rearrangement underneath. The grocery parking lot is half empty. The church sign says, "Be kind, even now," and someone taped a newspaper clipping to the bulletin board outside the library, just a headline. Arrest shocks community. The rest of the article is gone, probably taken by someone who wanted proof that the story finally moved forward. You step into the morning like you're testing thin ice. The air smells faintly of rain and burnt toast from a neighbor's kitchen. You make your way toward Main Street, passing the cafe, the alley, and the storage facility, all of them now part of a geography of grief mapped onto your feet. The news anchors keep saying closure, but the word doesn't fit here. Closure sounds neat, like filing a document. What you feel is more like a door left half open, with a breeze moving through. At the sheriff's office, yellow leaves cling to the chain-link fence, like forgotten notes. Reporters have packed up, their tripods folded, and gone. You imagine the echo of their voices, how they pronounced the suspect's name, and how they tilted their heads toward the camera, trying to sound both empathetic and detached. You wonder if they went home that night thinking about the people they interviewed, the mother with trembling hands, the coach, and the barista who found herself crying on live TV. You think about what it means to become content in someone else's broadcast. There's a mural being painted near the courthouse, commissioned months ago. Hands reaching toward a river, shades of blue layered like memory. The artist, a young woman in paint-splattered jeans, doesn't stop working as you pass. She's listening to music through her headphones, humming under her breath. You watch for a while, because in this story of decay and discovery, creation feels like an act of defiance. A real historical detail hums beneath your reflection. How, in 1980, before your town's tragedy even existed, the first known forensic use of DNA profiling was still years away. In those days, evidence meant fingerprints, fibers, and witness recollections sharpened by adrenaline. People believed what they saw because there was nothing else to believe. You think about how far science has come, and how it still can't explain why a person chooses darkness over light. You walk to the river. It's the same one that curves behind the old mill. The same one kids dared each other to jump into during summer. The same one that once carried away the sound of search boats. The water is low this season, revealing slick stones and half-buried bottles. You crouch, touch the surface, and feel the cold pull of time. Somewhere nearby, a heron lifts into the air, its wings a slow argument against gravity. You take it as a sign that life insists on continuing, even after. You hear someone approach. It's Mrs. Valdez, the woman who once touched her necklace in the supermarket when she heard the news. She greets you softly, asks if you're okay, then tells you her son's coming home for Thanksgiving. You both smile at that, at something so ordinary it feels miraculous. The conversation drifts toward the case because everything does these days, and she says she hopes the trial brings peace. Then she adds, quietly, but peace isn't the same as truth. You nod, and it lands in your chest like a final exam question you'll never finish. At home, your phone buzzes again. Breaking update. Prosecutors have filed additional charges. The tone of the report is firm and rehearsed. You mute it halfway through. You realize that sometimes silence is the only medium honest enough to carry pain without distorting it. As evening returns, you find yourself outside the cafe once more. Someone has set a single candle on the alley's edge, its flame stubborn in the wind. A few people gather around, strangers, neighbors, and the librarian. No speeches, no press, just a small circle of breathing, living witnesses. You don't take pictures. You just stand there, the fan in your mind humming as it always does, a steady current keeping you calm. Another historical truth drifts through your mind. The concept of a cold case isn't new. It dates back to the early 20th century, when detectives began reopening unsolved crimes stored in dusty archives. But only in recent decades has technology given those cases a heartbeat again. It's strange to think of memory as a machine that can be rebooted. The candle flickers lower. Someone hums a hymn, off-key but sincere. The alley's shadows move like they're listening. The smell of coffee, faint detergent, and October air folds together into something almost gentle. You think about the fern pressed between pages, the ghostly handwriting on the checkout card, and the chalk outline of her favorite drink on the cafe board. These fragments are what remain, and they're enough. An academic debate still floats in your thoughts. Do communities that face public tragedy heal through justice or through narrative? Is telling the story a form of therapy, or a wound reopened each time it's spoken aloud? You don't know. Maybe it's both. Maybe healing is just learning how to carry weight without letting it crush you. Later, back in your room, you open the window and let the cool air move through. The night is quiet, but not empty. Crickets start their chorus again. Cars pass distantly, and the creek resumes its eternal chewing. You close your eyes and see her face from that yearbook, smiling as if nothing bad could ever happen. For a moment, you let yourself believe that version, that the story ended before it ever broke, that she walked home safely, that the town stayed small and unremarkable. But the truth, whatever shape it takes, belongs to time now, not you. You lie down, fan humming, light low, and let your breathing match the rhythm of the night. Somewhere, justice is preparing its steps, steady and patient. And as sleep edges closer, you whisper once more into the quiet. Maybe someday we'll know the truth. But for now, sleep well.